Good morning, children. Hope all of you are fine. In the previous class, we have discussed about did women have a revolution? Our next topic is about the abolition of slavery. First of all, what do we mean by slavery? Slavery is a condition in which one human being is owned by another and he has to work hard without proper remuneration and appreciation. Now, let's understand the term colony. A country or area under the full or partial political control of another country known as colony. So, what is colony? A country or area under the full or partial political control of another country known as colony. Example, India. Before 1947, India was a colony of the Britishers. Here, France had colonies in the Caribbean islands. Martinique, Guadeloupe and San Domingo were the colonies of France in the Caribbean islands. Here they had plantations, and that's why these places were the important suppliers of commodities such as tobacco, sugar, indigo and coffee. Now let's understand the location of Caribbean islands. The Caribbean is a region that consists of the Caribbean Sea, many islands and the surrounding coasts. On a map, you will find it southeast of the Gulf of Mexico and the North American mainland, east of Central America and the north of South America. But European people were not ready to go and work there. So it created labor shortage. In order to work in these plantations, they need laborers. So, this problem was solved by the triangular slave trade between Europe, Africa and American continents. The slave trade was began in the 17th century. Now, we will discuss about the triangular slave trade. At first, French merchants sailed from the ports of Bordeaux or Nantes to the African coast. So, which were the two important ports of France? Bordeaux and Nantes. Then, from the African coast, they bought slaves from the local chieftains by giving some gifts to them. Then, they branded and shackled these slaves. Then these slaves were packed tightly into the ships for the 3-month-long voyage across the Atlantic to the Caribbean. There they were sold to the plantation owners. These slaves were used by the plantation owners to work in their factories. This was triangular slave trade. These slaves' condition was very pathetic. Then, how the slavery was ended? First, National Assembly thought to free slaves, but it did not ban slavery. Why? Because most of the people of National Assembly were the rich businessmen. They were making their profit through the slave trade. So, the National Assembly did not dare to stop it. Now, come to the reign of terror under Robespierre. He banned slavery in French colonies. This was one of the most revolutionary social reform of the Jacobin regime. The convention, which in 1794 legislated to free slaves in the French overseas possessions. But 10 years later, when Napoleon came to power, he reintroduced slavery. Then slavery was finally abolished in French colonies in 1848. Let's revise today's topic, the abolition of slavery. The unwillingness of Europeans to go and work in the colonies in the Caribbean, which were important suppliers of commodities such as tobacco, indigo, sugar, and coffee, created a shortage of labor on the plantations. Thus, the slave trade began in the 17th century. French merchants sailed from their ports to the African coast, where they bought slaves from local chieftains. Branded and shackled, the slaves were packed tightly into ships for the 3 months long voyage across the Atlantic to the Caribbean. There they were sold to plantation owners. The exploitation of slave labor made it possible to meet the growing demand in European markets for sugar, coffee, and indigo. Port cities like Bordeaux and Nantes owed their economic prosperity to the flourishing slave trade. The National Assembly held long debates for about whether the rights of man should be extended to all French subjects, including those in the colonies. But it did not pass any laws, fearing opposition from businessmen whose incomes depend on the slave trade. Jacobin regime in 1794 abolished slavery in the French colonies. However, 10 years later, Napoleon reintroduced slavery. Slavery was finally abolished in French colonies in 1848. Let me conclude today's session. I hope all of you have understood the content clearly. For your reference, I have uploaded the URL. Go through it. Notes are also attached along with this. Take it down. A test question paper is also there. Try it yourself. Thank you.